Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Blacks in Technology Charlotte Authenticity in Corporate Citizenship panel discussion and general body meeting. I really appreciate all the support we have today and everyone who's attended. Feel free to use the chat during the course of the program, but we're going to launch right in, first with introductions and then into our discussion with our esteemed guests, and then close out with some updates about what the chapter is up to this year. So thank you again for your participation. And again, feel free to chime in throughout the event, don't be shy. So again, my name is Natasha Walwyn Robinson. I lead the Charlotte chapter of Blacks in Technology Foundation. We are the largest community of Black people in technology in the world. And we focus on stomping the divide, which is to increase representation, provide support and resources to Black people to succeed in the technology industry. I'm so happy to have invited one of our prior scholarship recipients, Quad, to help me with this event today. He is going to introduce us to Deidre and Chris. So Quad, give a brief introduction of yourself and then launch right in.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Once again, I'm Quad Jeter. I'm a senior at North Mecklenburg High School, planning to attend North Carolina Agricultural and Technology University. Now I'd like to introduce our brilliant guests, Chris Woodfolk and Deidre Parrish-Williams. Chris Woodfolk serves as a corporate citizenship partner at Charlotte-based LendingTree, the nation's leading online marketplace for financial services, where he is responsible for executing the company's corporate giving strategy and promoting its philanthropic initiatives. His role focuses on connecting corporate and foundation partners across the country while ensuring the company upholds its community promise, focusing on four key ideas, including innovation and entrepreneurship, financial wellness, upward mobility, and home ownership. Previously, Woodfolk interned on LendingTree's strategy team, where he worked closely with the company's chief of staff. Woodfolk graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts in Public Policy and Leadership from the University of Virginia's Frank Batten School. As part of his studies, Woodfolk focused on housing policy and analyzed the ways in which local, state, and federal policies played a part in disproportionately affecting underserved communities throughout the United States in the 20th century. A Darden Future Year Scholar, Woodfolk plans to return to University of Virginia in the fall of 2023 as a part of their MBA program. Deidre Parrish-Williams leads Global Corporate Citizenship for Trane Technologies, an industry-leading manufacturer of climate control equipment and solutions. Deidre is responsible for leading the company's new citizenship strategy, which will invest $100 million of grant funding and 500,000 hours of volunteer time to upliftment of students around the world, underrepresented in the STEM field. Deidre began her career as a journalist before transitioning to corporate communications work, where she developed a deep passion for CSR. She has held leadership roles in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors for organizations like Newsday, the National Girl Scouts Association, QBE Insurance, and Bank of America. Originally from New York, where she was fortunate to find deep community ties, Deidre has held board seats that include Project Grad, the Nassau County Holocaust Museum, Energia Partnership at Molloy College, Bethpage Federal Credit Union, and currently the CMS Foundation. A married mother of 2 adult daughters, Deidre is also a published novelist and a life coach. Thank you all for being here, and I'd like to pass it back to Ms. Robinson.
Thank you very much. Great job. And I'm so thrilled and excited. I've come to know both of you over the course of the year, and I'm just so happy to bring the leaders together and to amplify your work. So I did have some questions for you. And, again, anyone who's listening on the attendees, feel free to drop questions in the chat and we'll make sure to share it with our guests. So this first question is for both of you. Maybe we'll start with Chris. And it is, what does the title of our event, Authenticity and Corporate Citizenship, mean to you?
Well, before I kind of go into authenticity and corporate citizenship, I want to say thank you, Quad, for that wonderful introduction, Natasha, for having us, Deidre, to be able to share the virtual stage with you, and then Dennis and the rest of the Blacks in Technology team for making this work today. So authenticity and corporate citizenship to me means a couple of different things. And, I want to start with rewinding. So going back to the summer of 2020, following the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. And at that time, it forced a lot of corporations and the employees within those corporations to re-emphasize their corporate social responsibility. what was their strategy going to be moving forward around how they approach philanthropy. And the same thing happened at LendingTree. And so, on top of that, corporations were, again, they were no longer allowed to fund for the sake of funding, right? There had to be a strategy that went along with that funding. And Quad talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but from a LendingTree and a LendingTree Foundation perspective, everything we do is rooted around innovation and entrepreneurship, upward mobility, financial wellness, and home ownership, right? And so that was the strategy that we put in place that legitimized our corporate citizenship. And then it's no secret that great leaders have to invest in corporate citizenship, in CSR, and treat it just as the revenue generating side of the business is treated in order for it to work. And so again, we were fortunate enough to have, our CEO, Doug Lebda, invest in our team. And that trickled down to Jill Olmstead, our chief HR officer, and then in the hiring of my boss, April Whitlock, who is the head of corporate citizenship here. All of those things legitimized our corporate citizenship approach. But when you talk about authenticity in corporate citizenship, the strategy and building out the team and the investment from the leaders is the most important piece.
Excellent. Yeah, that was definitely a pivotal moment for a lot of us, right, in 2020. That's when I started this chapter and I was ready to make a real change and real impact. So thank you so much for sharing that. And Deirdre, similarly, can you share your thoughts on the title and what that means for you?
Yeah, I have to, just as Chris did, first acknowledge the panel, the organization, attendees here today, you all for inviting us. Really, really delighted to have an opportunity to shed some light on the world, the corporate citizenship world. I think it's a little bit of a mystery to many people. Mostly people tend to experience corporate citizenship in terms of seeing the big checks or seeing the money that's given out, but don't really understand that there's strategy and real deep thinking that goes into getting to that moment. So I'll back up for a second and just kind of talk a little bit about corporate citizenship in general. Corporations have an opportunity, and I think an obligation, to participate in ensuring the well-being of the communities where they reside, where their employees reside, where they generate revenue. Just like citizens and nonprofit organizations and government agencies, organizations have an obligation and an opportunity to contribute to the well-being of the community. So each of those factions plays a part, right? Employees, individuals pay taxes, we volunteer our time, we participate in the well-being and upkeep of our communities. Government agencies do the same thing, and nonprofit organizations as well. They help to fill gaps that corporations and government leave. They fill gaps and help to support needs that fall in the cracks, I suppose. But corporations have a role to play too, right? And I think over the course of time, if you look back at corporate citizenship, it's evolved to a place where there is an expectation of much greater participation and accountability. The average consumer expects for corporations to step forward and to participate in the well-being of the society. They want to see corporations exercise their voice around critical issues. The headlines that we're seeing right now are a perfect example. What's going on in Ukraine. People are looking for corporations to articulate their position on these issues, right? They don't expect companies to be silent. They also expect them to articulate their positions in terms of their dollars and their giving and their doing. So for me, authenticity means that you have to have alignment around the things that you do and the things that you believe. And that starts with the internal organization. Every organization has a culture, and that culture should be what drives and informs your corporate citizenship strategy. There can't be disconnects, because that's what creates over the opposite of authenticity, inauthentic, I suppose. You don't want there to be disconnects. Whatever it is that you are going to commit to doing as a corporation really needs to resonate with who you are. So at Train Technology, similar to what Chris was describing, I think the George Floyd event was a really pivotal time. It caused our entire nation, our world, in fact, to hit reset and really think about who we want to be as a nation, how we want to show up for one another. And that's the same thing that happened at Train Technologies at the time. Coincidentally, we were undergoing a divestiture from a company some of you may know, Ingersoll Rand. And that divestiture also gave us a moment to kind of stop and pause and decide, who do we want to be when we grow up, in terms of our product portfolio, in terms of our geographic footprint, but also in terms of our corporate citizenship and how we show up and what we align around. Again, George Floyd looming around us at that time gave us a lot to think about. And we had to think about whether we were really showing up in the communities in the ways that we thought we were, meaning to create equitable opportunities for people of color and for women. And the answer, quite honestly, was no, we weren't. And so we had to take a hard look at our approaches. And as a result of that moment in time, we developed a completely new, a very bold corporate citizenship strategy. It's actually the first time in Train Technologies history, but it was driven by some soul searching that was prompted by a really significant historical event. And it was a coming together in a moment that really kind of solidified who we are and what we stand for. And I think I am really proud of it, in fact, because it was the kind of organic coming together that really does help to ensure that we're moving in an authentic fashion.
Wonderful. And both of you touched on strategy a lot. And could you give us some insight into like what you're focused on as far as goals, maybe this year, or what you've been focused on since the George Floyd incident in your respective roles, just to give us a feel for some of the things that are involved in the work that you do. So maybe, Deidre, if you can continue on with where you had left off.
Sure. So I mentioned that we've just launched a strategy, a corporate citizenship strategy. And like with anything else, you know, you're endeavoring to do, you have to be somewhat focused if you intend to move the dial. And while we did not have a strategy prior to last year, there was corporate citizenship work happening, but it was kind of scattershot. We had people who were rescuing puppies and cleaning their local streams and planting trees. It was all over the place, all with good intent, all meaningful to some segment of the community. But if as an organization, you're trying to move a dial, obviously it's helpful if you go from this, to being more focused. Your chances of success are much increased if you're more focused. And so that's what we did. And our focus had to include not just looking at what's going on in the world and in the communities that we live, but also looking at what are we equipped to do as a climate solution company. What are our talents and our resources positioning us to do? Because it's not helpful for us to show up in the community and say, well, we want to provide housing. We're not connected to the housing industry. Probably better to leave that to an organization like Lowe's that's got lots of lumber around, or a bank perhaps that is involved in mortgage lending. For us, because we are a technology-based organization, we thought the better thing for us to do would be to deploy our resources to help fill gaps as it relates to education and career development, specifically underrepresented folks that don't have access, don't have resources to gain entree to STEM careers. And so that's our focus. Sustainable Futures is all about supporting underrepresented learners around the world, giving them access to and hopefully exciting their imaginations about sustainability, green concepts, the STEM space, and then supporting them through their academic journey and helping them gain successful entree into the working world. So that's what we are up to.
Awesome. Okay, and Chris, how about you?
Definitely, and to kind of follow up on Deidre's point, I think one of the interesting things that she said early on in that, right, is that there were a lot of people in Charlotte and in the country who were doing good, and a lot of corporations that were doing good, except it was all over the place. And at Lending Tree, we have a term for that. We called it confetti giving. And it was something that we had been doing for a long time before, you know, we were brought on to set the strategy. And we'd be doing a lot of grant funding, as in $25,000 right here in the tech sector, $15,000 sponsoring a gala, different kinds of things like that. While all good, again, how are you executing your community promise in line with what your business priorities are as well? And so, when we came in and we're kind of setting the strategy, April and myself sat down and, we, again, like Quad mentioned earlier, with our 4 giving pillars, we decided everything that we were going to do was based off of those 4 pillars. And then we went out and we listened. And we had hundreds of meetings with nonprofits. And we were able to determine, within the scope of those pillars, which are everything that we talk about, from a business side as well, how are we going to be able to impact change? And so what we quickly found out was that there was this group of nonprofits who were primarily founder-led, community-embedded, emerging nonprofits who, for lack of a better word, needed to lessen the barriers to entry in order to get funding. And so what we did is we created what we call the Lend a Hand Alliance cohort. And so we have wrapped our arms around 10 nonprofits that all hit on multiple of our pillars of our key initiatives, right? But we have wrapped our arms around them in a way that's called trust-based philanthropy. So what is trust-based philanthropy? Trust-based philanthropy is a set of 6 guiding principles that make up how a funder interacts with their grantees. And so we provide unrestricted funding to these nonprofits. So we know that as long as they're continuing to do the amazing work that they're doing in the community, in the Charlotte community, we want them to be able to use those funds in any way that they see fit. The second thing is, if you're going to invest in and serve as an angel funder for people and give them transformational amounts of money, in 2022, you better be willing to do that over multiple years. We had to get rid of the confetti giving, right? And so we went deep with these nonprofits. The cohort is for 3 years, $125,000 for 3 years. So transformational amounts of money. And by the way, these nonprofits get the aided brand awareness. So when you see the Lending Tree logo, right, when you see the Lending Tree name, for a lot of them, that legitimized them, right back to this point of authenticity and corporate citizenship. And so, that was our strategy moving forward. And if you talk about our goals for 2022 and what we want to make sure that happens is we want to shake up the funding model, right, and the nonprofit and funder community, just like we shook up the housing market and the mortgage market in 1996 when we stepped on the scene. We want to embed trust-based philanthropy not only across our business, but in Charlotte. And that's a tall task. It is hard. This is a city that is definitely rooted in its tradition. And to bring something, like unrestricted multi-year grant funding to the table is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of corporations. But for Lending Tree, we have the ability to do it because we got to start from a clean slate, and investing in community embedded emerging nonprofits allows us to do really creative work in the scope, in the pillars that we work on. So, those are 2 objectives. And then the last is employee engagement. And I'll touch on that in a little bit. And that's tough, right? With COVID and the pandemic and the hybrid workforce work model, that's been tough. But that is another goal of ours, is to increase that.
Wow, you just gave a lot of great information, and I'm very curious about this next cohort whenever we can sign up or apply for that. So excellent. So we are Blacks in Technology, and thank you for all new folks who are joining. Great conversation so far. I have to ask, what role does technology play in your work? So it seems obvious, but in terms of kind of like you're saying with the virtual kind of thing, how have you relied on technology in your day-to-day to carry out some of the work you've been describing?
I can take that one. Obviously technology, and I'll start from a broad view. It was without technology to be able to interact with the nonprofit community and being a relatively new foundation and trying to set a giving strategy would be impossible. And so, we know that, and the technology that we have available, just like you guys are seeing with me on the Zoom right now, it was really helped us get to a point where we needed to get to before the in-person stuff could start. But then in terms of how do we use the technology and the technology expertise at LendingTree, to positively impact corporate citizenship, the community, I think the most amazing part is we have these employees that have this incredible amount of social capital, right? So if you take the nonprofits that we work with, the organizations that we work with, a lot of them are focused on, increasing skills for lower, middle, and high school students. So let's say STEM, computer science, right? Things like that. And then over here, we have these LendingTree employees who every day come into work and they serve as test engineers, software engineers, DevOps engineers. We have a creative team. We have a marketing team. All these different components that make up your typical fintech company. We take those employees and we don't want them to just be volunteers, right? We want them to positively engage with these nonprofits. So that means serving on boards, for the organization, helping the organization take what they're doing to the next level. And it's been really, really interesting to see how that social capital piece of LendingTree employees and the expertise that they're able to deploy, how it positively impacts the Charlotte community. And as more of them come into the office, it's about saying, hey, these four walls of LendingTree are incredible and you do great work here, but what's going on in the West Side? And how can you help? And what's going on uptown? What's going on in the East Side? And that's been something that we're, again, working on. And if I could have a fourth goal, it would probably be that on top of everything else. But technology it plays a role, and especially as we focus in on entrepreneurship and innovation as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been extremely busy the past 2 years, and I've gotten probably more work done than ever, since we've all moved to this virtual digital lifestyle. But Deirdre, what would you say on this topic?
It's really a difficult question to respond to, only because technology is like our air, right? It gives life to absolutely everything. There's no aspect of our work that is not impacted by, enhanced by technology, macro and micro. So my role is global. We've got people all around the world. And certainly we rely on technology in the most simple ways, obviously, to keep in touch, because I can't touch down everywhere, and certainly not in the last couple of years. But it is helpful in keeping us connected. Simple things like this, being able to have a virtual meeting, and also being able to dispatch folks out into the field to give us a view into what's going on. We're doing all sorts of, I'd say, low-tech sorts of things, where we're sending people out into the field with their cell phones. Report back, let us know what's going on. One of the ways that it's really important for us to stay connected is to share information with our workforce. I mentioned at the top, or actually it was Quad who mentioned in the opening, that our strategy includes a promise of the donation of 500,000 hours of employee volunteer time around the world. It's a lot of time, a lot of hours, and we've got to constantly be keeping that engine fed. And part of that means giving people examples, ideas, inspiration to show them what volunteerism can look like. And I tell people all the time, while you're out there, do the work, have a great time, but bring some stories back. So some of it is really low-tech sorts of things like that. We bring content back. We find ways to package it, make it exciting, and share with people. We also have a platform that was created to help employees to manage their employee volunteerism. So I always say that there are different types of volunteers. There are the ones that are full head of steam all the time, always have great ideas. And sometimes you've got to lasso them because they're always trying to get out the door into the community. And then there are those that are inclined to volunteer, but don't necessarily know what they want to do or what resources are available to them. That's probably the bulk of what employee volunteerism looks like. They fit in that category. And for those folks, we want to curate opportunities and kind of aggregate resources for them so it's as turnkey as possible. So we rely on technology to do that. We have an intranet environment that's specifically for them. and it has an app that they can use on their phone. So at any time, they can either book themselves for an event, they can log their employee volunteer time, because that's part of this story too, is that we want to be able to report and get credit for. You all are probably aware of something that happens annually in terms of ESG reporting. And what that means is that it's a form of an annual report where we're reporting on our environmental, social, and governance behaviors for the year. And that's something that's gotten increasing, I won't say scrutiny, but importance. It's gained much more importance in the investment community. And so therefore it's very important to us, and we want to be able to report our full story there. Being able to report the full story means that we have to have all the data, and we rely on technology in that way. And another category I'll point to, there are many of them, but another that I'll point to is a solution that we're building. So I mentioned that we've got these goals that we've articulated. We're going to be giving $100 million in the next several years to drive our strategy. Again, we have to be able to track and count all of that. And we know that there's activity happening today that we don't have a line of sight to. So that means that we're not counting it. And that's problematic for a couple of reasons, in part because for tax and compliance, you want to make sure that you're recording it correctly. But then in terms of that ESG report and those annual narratives that we're shaping each year, we also want to make sure that it's complete. So I've enlisted our HR solutions folks. Those are the people who tool our HR systems to help create a resource that will enable our business folks, the people who are selling equipment, to accurately tag and track the instances where they're giving equipment away, which is what's known as in-kind giving. So in our business, if we sometimes look at inventory that may be scratched or dented, or maybe obsolete because it's an older model, or maybe we're upgrading our laptops and we're deciding that we're going to gift some of them to a nonprofit organization, or maybe members of our legal team are donating their time pro bono to a nonprofit organization to help them shore up their employee handbooks. In-kind giving can take many forms, but whatever the form, we want to make sure that we have a line of sight to it, that we're tracking and counting it. And today we do not. So our HR solutions folks are creating a tool for us that is going to sit with our financial recording systems and enable people to now tag all of that activity, monetize it, and it gives us the ability to more accurately track it. So lots of ways that technology really supports our work. And I couldn't do justice to the number and variety of them, but those are just a few.
Wow. Yep. Just reading here that, so he asked, so what do you think will be the key to sustaining all your efforts, keeping funding over multiple years, encouraging, allowing employees to volunteer when there's leadership changes, or as time goes on, memories may fade or things may change? How do you keep this as like an ongoing living thing over time? I think that's a really great question, and maybe both of you could answer.
It is. I think that it's really important for organizations to be deliberate about culture. Culture is not something that you just kind of let happen casually. And every company has a culture. And the more deliberate you are about it and consistently deliberate about it you are, the more effective you'll be at maintaining a certain sort of culture. So for us, when it comes to corporate citizenship, one of the ways that we're working to drive the kind of culture we want and the kind of engagement that we seek is to develop teams of people around the organization that are going to help us with that. So as I said, we're not just Charlotte, we're global. And so it makes it, the bigger you are, the broader, the base of folks that you're working with, the tougher it is to manage culture and to manage initiatives. So we're standing up, we call them purple teams because purple is our signature color as Trane Technologies. But these are purple teams that are essentially going to be deputized by my team. And it's going to give us the ability to have local corporate citizenship leaders that we're going to work with, support, kind of make them local experts. We're going to meet with them on a regular basis. They're going to report out to us, share stories, we'll problem solve things together. They're going to be the ones who are responsible for curating local events. They're also going to be the people that end up being something of a local face in their community. So essentially, it's an extension of my CSR team that sits here in Davidson. But that sort of thing is important. As I said, you have to be deliberate about it, because otherwise you end up with lots of Lone Ranger behavior around the organization, all well-intentioned, but it could look and feel very different. So I take culture very, very seriously. Train Technologies takes it seriously. And so that's what we're trying to do to make sure that our intent behind our strategy is executed consistently and thoroughly across the world.
Wow, okay. And Chris, any thoughts?
I mean, Deidre really hit the nail on the head there with that answer, but two things, and I'm going to completely echo her, but culture being one, same thing at LendingTree. Our culture is everything. I look at us as kind of this 25-year-old startup company, which I'm half joking, but also half serious, that in order to be around for the next 5 to 10 years from a corporate citizenship perspective in the LendingTree Foundation, you have to always make sure you know what's going on in every segment of our business. And so I spend a lot of time internally understanding, and we sit in HR. The processes of a little bit of what Deidre was talking about earlier with our employee giving through Bright Funds and how we track and measure our impact in terms of technology, that'll be there, and that's great. But what's going on with the marketing team at any given time, and how can we increase our brand awareness around that? How do we leverage, for example, our partnership with the Charlotte Hornets in order to tie in philanthropy, right? So once you're able to make those ties internally and then couple them with the culture of the company, on top of that, you have to be able to put yourself out in the community externally and employ those employees to do the same, right? So again, when we talk about measuring impact, when we talk about being around after corporate citizenship is the cool thing or the trend that is being talked about at that moment, very, very hard for leadership to come back and say, hey, I don't know if this is working out. If you have multiple LendingTree, for example, employees that serve for CCAP, which is the Charlotte Corporate Affairs Professionals Group, right? And see what they're doing in that. How do we get our CEO and our C-suite involved in stuff like the Mayor's Racial Equity Initiative? Again, if you're able to take that culture and not only foster it internally, but also take it and ingrain it into the Charlotte community and then every operating city that you work in, then you're always going to be there. You're always going to be around, and the leadership can change, and that's why you have the strategy, right, that you put in place initially. It goes back to the multi-year funding, right? Because if I'm gone tomorrow, these nonprofits are still getting that funding, and the next person that comes in has to understand what's the culture, what are we doing in the community, and how much longer am I funding X organization? So it all kind of ties in together, but that's a great question, and I hope that was a little bit of a helpful answer.
Yeah, for sure. And just the role of media, and helping to bring publicity to and capture some of the moments for you, is also something that I think Blacks in Technology we're very good at, especially online and digitally, is having a strong brand presence online and, again, amplifying the work of the partners we work with. So this was all great for me. And I think you both touched on a lot of the challenges, let's say, to the work, but I'm curious about the joys and, what draws you to this work and what motivates you or gets you excited about what you do. I'll say for me personally, I like to say that I'm, a social worker masquerading as a lawyer and techie, but for you, what would you say is a joy for you?
You've got to tell us who you want to go first.
Sure, Deirdre, thanks.
This is like, the layup question, right? Because we work hard. I mean, I think there's a bit of a misconception when it comes to our work, even internally among my colleagues. I think sometimes they think, that's where they give the money away. That's what the CSR team is doing. It's a lot of work. There is a lot of work to do it right and to do it well. There's a lot of work involved, but at the end of the day, to be able to do work that elevates the brand of the corporation that you believe in, helps you to articulate the belief and the philosophy of an organization in terms of its commitment to community and making community better than it found it. That's meaningful. At the end of the day, to be able to say, I'm working hard, but I'm on the right side of things. That's so meaningful. And then at the same time, you know, there's the obvious benefit. I mean, there's two sides to it, right? In that we're supporting some of the folks, some of the communities, some of the families that have the greatest need. And the kind of support that we're providing can be meaningful to them, right? There's nothing more important than helping to fortify a child's academic experience or to help level the playing field for people who don't have access to the kinds of things they should, to help them transition successfully into school, provide them supports in that academic environment to help them feel like they are ready because they may be the first in their family to set foot on a college campus. And that can be overwhelming. There's a lot of that, can I do this, you know, that can get in kids' way. And to provide the support to help them successfully navigate that terrain, it's meaningful. It's meaningful. You hate to know that there is such incredible need in our communities, but boy, does it feel good to be able to do something to provide a measure of support and to also, what would I say, to also be an inspiration to other people, because that's the other thing you have to remember, that people are always watching, and we watch our peers watch us, and we want to be a good example to our communities. We want to be a good example to our industry. And I think our industry goes as we go. Our CEO has a belief that one company can change an industry and an industry can change the world. So I take that to heart. That means everything to me. And I, as I said, do work hard every day, but I'm really, really gratified to be able to do this kind of work.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
And I'll kind of go off that and say that it's very hard to wake up in the morning and to get in my car and come to work and be upset or angry or mad because so much good is being done, especially in this space. I'm not just talking about Lending Tree or the people on this call, or I'm talking about just in general. You have to keep that in perspective. So that is a joy. And I think a lot of times people get lost in the news, right? And you spend a lot of time understanding, trying to analyze what's going on in the world, and you miss those snippets, right? Especially if you don't exist in the corporate citizenship space every day and see it every day. You could think that the world is not a great place. And, I'm here to say that there are a lot of people that are, I would say there are more people that are trying to affect positive change. And then on top of that, for the people that we serve, the organizations that we serve, they're a small part of what we do, but what we do for them is their entire world. And that is something to remember. So you talk about joy in the work is to see the expressions, the interactions, the sweat equity that's being put into the work that they're doing. And for us to come in and say, hey, we believe in you. We're going to back you not only with funding, but here's some employees as well, right? And here's what we're going to do for you over the next several years. You get to see who people really are and the honest and amazing personalities. So, and I know that there's talk about, how does this affect me if I don't want to necessarily do corporate citizenship as everything that I do in my life. I would say that Lending Tree employees, one of the culture fits is that you cannot just show up and do your job every day and not have a passion that lies outside of it. And most of the time that passion is rooted in helping somebody somewhere, right? Whether it's a child in school, a kid go to STEM camp, right? Anything like that, you have to be able to be holistic. You have to be a Renaissance person, right? It's like, for example, I use the term, as Quad said, I'm getting ready to go back to business school and we'll probably change paths. But I know that the work that I'm doing here will forever follow me. And whatever corporation I end up in next, there will be a small part of this that I'm invested in. And it might be 5% of my time. Right now, it's 100% of my time. But that I have to remember is important, and we have to keep doing that in order for the Charlotte community and the world to remain positive. So, it really is the good work, and I have to remind myself of that as well. But know that as you guys, embark on your journeys.
Yeah, and so how can, the attendees on the call get involved with the work you're doing or support it, or if they know a nonprofit that would benefit from some of this work, like what are ways they can engage with either one of you? Maybe Chris, could you share some ideas?
Definitely. Well, there's a number of ways that you guys can engage with us and our team and myself. And the first is, I will always say that, I'm here to not only better the community, but to make as many connections, to make as many networking opportunities as I can. I'd be naive not to take the intro call. So, you will have my details. Reach out to me. If it's, hey, Chris, I have a question about corporate citizenship in this aspect. Here's what I'm doing in my community. I might have this nonprofit off to the side that I'm working about. Any ideas on how I can grow it? Or if you want to have a general discussion about Lending Tree, technology, what it's like to be Black in a majority white world, right? If we're being honest with each other, I think I want to make sure that you guys know that whatever your passion is, we can have a conversation about that. It doesn't have to necessarily revolve around corporate citizenship. And then I will say the other part that is a little bit more directly tied to corporate citizenship in ways that we can kind of get involved together is, get creative. There's ways that, go beyond volunteering in your community to get involved. I found out a couple of weeks ago, actually, as I was, doing taxes and different financial stuff, that a lot of times you can use your credit card rewards, right? For example, to donate to a nonprofit of your choice, and that company might match that. And that's a way that you can give back to your community, right? And it might not be much, 5, 10, it's not the dollar amount. It's the intention behind it. So, remember that. But the first thing is always feel free to reach out because, without reaching out, Natasha and myself would never connected. I would have never been here. And the second thing is get creative and be creative and always be open to new ideas and new possibilities because, if I wasn't, I wouldn't be sitting here, wouldn't be in Charlotte, North Carolina, working for Lending Tree. And you never know where life is going to take you, but you always got to be open, and ready for the next big thing.
Yeah, and just very quickly, we do have a leader, Sandy, who just recently relocated to Charlotte. And so she is looking for recommendations on how to align and get engaged with you all. So thanks, Chris, for putting yourself out there. And I see, Deirdre, you've given your contact information too in the chat. Really appreciate that. And Deirdre, what are some other ways you would recommend as well to engage with Train Technologies if you're in the Charlotte community looking to build that relationship?
Sure, and it depends, right, on the type of entity you are and what it is that you're hoping to do, hoping that Train might help you with. If you're a nonprofit organization, certainly I'm interested in getting to know you, whether you align, fit in that sweet spot in terms of the types of partners that we're looking for or not, because we're interested in knowing our community and interested in exploring what kind of need exists in our community. I think I've so enjoyed getting to know Chris and hearing his perspectives and approaches and agree with him when he talks about being creative. I feel the same way. I think that certainly the tried and true approaches in terms of dollars and volunteerism are meaningful. We think about engagement more broadly. And because we're talking about trying to support students, we're always looking for ways to create experiences for them because we know how meaningful it is for students to have experiences outside of a textbook or outside of a classroom that helps them bridge the gap between what they may be thinking about in terms of their career versus what the reality is of it. And that's where we know that we have a lot of experience that can help them fill that gap. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. We have an emerging partnership with Johnson C. Smith. that came about through real creative thinking. We have an innovation center at Train Technologies called Operation Possible that encourages our employees to think broad, bold, boundless, about absurdities that exist in the world and what we can do to create solutions around them. And not necessarily absurdities that have anything to do with our products, just what exists in the world that should not today in 2022. And right now we're looking at plastics. My thinking is that we don't do enough to encourage young people, students, to be creative and to innovate just for the sake of that. We don't help them use that muscle in their brain enough. Usually when students are in school, they're focused on a specific subject, moving from point A to point B and achieving, whatever it is, whatever that criteria of that course is. We want them to be more innovative. And there is data that's telling us that in years to come, creativity and innovation are going to be much needed skills for tomorrow's professionals. So I worked with a team internally to create something of a curriculum based on this design thinking that we created internally for our innovation teams. And we're piloting it now at schools on college campuses. It's at Johnson C. Smith. It's at the University of Central Missouri. We're working on some universities in the Europe market as well. And that sort of thing, right now, it's undetermined where it will go. I don't know if it's going to generate need for grant funding. I don't know how much we're going to need in terms of employee volunteerism, but that sort of thinking, we know that there's value to the students. We know that there's resource that we have that we can share with students. So we're going to pilot it and see where it goes. And I think we have to be willing to do that, right? To just try some things out, see how things go. So I tell people all the time that I'm open to creative, to the ideation process. If you've got ideas that you think might be worth exploring at Train Technologies, now you've got an email address. I'm open to hearing them and would love to hear what kinds of things you're trying to solve in your communities.
Thank you so much. I hope that helps answer for Sandy and definitely for me as well. So it's good to hear that because I've met in the past week a few summer camps or youth focused programs in the Charlotte area that are looking to partner. So maybe offline, I'll share some of that with you. Some really interesting ones like a rowing one and really finding creative ways to get kids engaged and still with the tech focus. But yeah, that brings us to our conclusion of the formal panel questions I had prepared. And I'll just pause and see if there's any other questions folks have in the chat. Give a couple of minutes for that. And then just quickly share some updates we have for the chapter. But yeah, look, thank you so much. We got some good feedback already. And I really appreciate all of your thoughts today and sharing so much about what you've been doing. So thank you.
Happy to. And I'll just say to the folks on the call or anybody who hears the recording that this is not a speak now or forever hold your peace sort of thing. You can always follow up at any point. I'm happy to chat and to get acquainted separately.
Yeah, thank you guys, everybody on the call. And, I would say if you can take one thing away from today, go and positively impact somebody's life between now and the time that you go to bed. And I think, if we all do that, the world is a much better place. And a lot of people think that, it's a little cheesy, but you never know. You never know what people are going through. And so, thank you guys again, and feel free to reach out and I'll throw my email in the chat.
Great. Yeah, I'm just checking the chat again. Thanks, Eldra.
I'm interested to know if Sandy's willing to share what kind of nonprofit. I think she put an acronym in, but it's not one that I know.
Is Sandy still there? Maybe she's still there.
She appears to be.
Okay. If you could share the name of your nonprofit, or I don't know, Dennis, if you're able to unmute Sandy. Oh, there she is.
Has the ability to talk.
Maybe Sandy's being shy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's harder to type, but basically, I am with DKMS, and we're a German-founded nonprofit, and we're in 7 countries. So we've relocated to Charlotte for our U.S. presence, and basically we fight blood cancer and blood disorders like leukemia, lymphoma, sickle cell anemia by providing stem cell transplants to patients in need. So our big engagement opportunity that we'd love to use in Charlotte is building and diversifying our donor registry for blood stem cells and bone marrow.
Curious to know what prompted the move to Charlotte.
We were in New York City, and they just found that with, you know, kind of a lot of move to the Southeast, shift in corporations. We do have a lot of German companies that have, you know, have a presence in Charlotte. There's just been a lot of different variables that have indicated that Charlotte might be a really good place to grow and expand, because we have about, I think, maybe 1.1 million people in the registry in the US, but we have about 7 to 8 million in Germany alone. So kind of with the melting pot that is the United States, we really need to kind of tap into a minority base so that different communities have the same amount of opportunity to get better with a stem cell transplant, and that doesn't exist right now.
Definitely. Sandy, I would love to connect on this. So especially Charlotte based, I think this, you know, and talk about our employee base and something that would be really interesting for them as well. That is good to know. Yeah,
it's like what you said. I mean, people technically can be lifesavers. You can technically save someone's life. There's nothing. I worked in nonprofit my whole career, and this is such a mission-driven, amazing organization that I think Charlotte, once they know who we are, they'll just really embrace it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sandy, could you share your email address in the chat?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we have 3 minutes left. So I was just going to quickly let you know what's coming up for the rest of the spring. We are on the 30th of this month hosting an info session with Create Opportunity. It's an organization that helps provide free training and guaranteed job placement in predominantly software engineering roles. It's a 2-year program, and again, it's free for participants. So if you know anyone who may be interested in upskilling and like to learn more, I will be sending out a blast to members. If you're not a member, please join Blacks in Technology and indicate Charlotte, and you'll get more information about that information session. And then the scholarship, our Blacks in Technology Charlotte Promise Scholarship, is going to be hosted again the second year. Quad was one of our recipients last year, and we're going to open the application up on April 15th. This year, we'll be awarding 5 $500 scholarships for Charlotte High School juniors and seniors who are interested in pursuing STEM or entrepreneurship. So I can definitely send more information to you about that. And then finally, we're going to try to do something like a networking social with one of our partners, CapTech Consulting, in May. We're still working out the plans and logistics of where it's going to occur, but it is planned to be in person. So if you're ready to mingle in person, we'll definitely be sharing more information again to the group about that. So I'm really excited for some upcoming events we have, and just thank you again for joining, and I'll drop my information again in the chat. And thank you so much for everyone's time and making this a successful event, and have a great rest of your week and take care.
Thank you so much, Natasha and Dennis. Nice to meet you, Chris.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a good
you.
evening.